guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher. And man, I appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and watching the videos and hanging out with me for a little bit. Guys, today we're going to be talking about cold fronts, and I sort of want to give you guys just a really good seminar, a little tutorial on how cold fronts affect bass and the adjustments that you need to make when a cold front comes through before and after. Because cold fronts, it's like all cold fronts are not created the same. A lot of them are different in their intensities and the weather patterns and conditions that they, that they put forth. So I want to give you guys just a really good bunch of information on how to help you deal with cold fronts, because if you fish long enough, you're going to have to deal with cold fronts at some point of the cold front passing through or getting ready to pass through or have passed through. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. Also, guys, speaking of cold fronts, one of the best cold front lures you can use is a little finesse jig. This is my Blaukat Power Finesse throwback jig from Cumberland Pro Lures. It's got frog hair living rubber on it, hand-tied skirt. Guys, this is just the finest little finesse jig that you're gonna find. It works really good after a front and in this time of year, in the fall time of the year. And one little tip I'll give with you guys, try this Zoom speed crawl. A lot of times as the water gets colder, the speed crawl, the tails on it will slow the fall, and they like that a little bit. So I'll put this in my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to order one through that link, get you some good jigs and help the channel out at the same time. Also, guys, thank you very much real quick for everybody that's taken time to hit that subscribe button here to the Fishing Teacher. I really appreciate that. It's free and easy. If you haven't done that, just hit the subscribe button, the like button. Comment on the video, share the videos. It's a good way to help the channel, so thank you very much for that. Okay, cold fronts are a reality of bass fishing that definitely affect the mood and the personality of the fish and the techniques that they prefer, and not so much the areas that they live in per se, but how you approach those areas. Because first of all, the extent of which a cold front affects bass, it depends on a lot of different factors. It depends on the time of the year, which is extremely critical, and it depends on the intensity or the lack of intensity in that frontal passage. Now, one of the things you're going to find out is that there's two periods of the year that cold fronts really impact bass, and there's two times a year they don't hardly affect them at all. If you're fishing in the wintertime, usually from about, say, December into maybe early March, something like that, mid-March, cold fronts don't affect bass much as far as the techniques that you use. It's like you can catch bass pretty much on the same techniques before, during, and after a front, and the fronts are different in the wintertime and also in the summertime. Frontal passages in the summertime have very little to do with how you need to adjust your techniques, that time of year. There's just something about the water temperatures being on the extremes that cold fronts just don't affect the bass that much. The two times a year that they affect the bass the most is in the springtime of the year and the fall time of the year. Specifically when that water temperature is in the 50s and the 60s. This is when you're really going to notice it. So given that, depending upon what part of the country you're in, you're going to notice the cold fronts have a really big impact on the fish, like say in March and April in a lot of lakes across the country. That's usually when the water's in the 50s to 60s. And then again in October and November, like we're in at the time of filming this video, we're into the end of October. So that's the windows I want to talk about. Now, I don't know why that is. All I know, it is true. If there's one thing that I do know about bass fishing that is undisputable, in my opinion, it's that is when the cold fronts really affect bass, and you need to make a change with that. Okay, first of all, a lot of it depends on the type of cold front that you have coming through. And normally in the spring and the fall time of the year, prior to a front rolling through, and sometimes even as the front is rolling through, the fish usually can be pretty active, and you'll notice that they tend to chase baits more. Prior to a front, a lot of times you have some of these conditions. You usually have some type of a south or southwest wind. Air temperatures are usually normal or above normal. And depending upon the type of front, you usually have some type of skylight condition change in terms of clouds moving in. And all that type of stuff factored in together. You may or may not have wind with it. Sometimes at certain passages, you'll have a strong south wind. But anyway, prior to the front, whatever reason it is, it has something to do with the activation of the overall food chain in a body of water. Bass are usually active. So that's when you're fishing. That's when I fish my aggressive reaction baits, like my crankbaits, my spinner baits, chatter baits, top water, swim baits, glide baits, prior to a frontal system. Now, after that frontal system comes through, you're going to have two different type of scenarios with this. you're either going to have a front roll through and the wind is going to switch to the north. That's usually what it always does. Sometimes, depending upon what part of the country you're in, it can switch to the northeast or the northwest or the north, but you usually have some type of 180-degree shift in the wind direction. And depending upon the front, you may or may not have wind associated with it. And you may or may not have clouds or associated with it. Some frontal passages, they'll come through, you'll have a major temperature drop, the wind gets strong, like 20, 25 miles an hour out of the north, bluebird sky, and other frontal passages, it may remain cloudy after the front rolls through for a little bit, and you may not have much wind with it. So if you have a situation like that where you don't have much wind and you still have low light conditions, you're not going to have to make much of an adjustment. Those are usually weaker frontal systems, but the strong frontal systems, usually those Arctic air frontal systems, these are the ones I'm talking about that will have a big impact. Those are the ones that have a significant temperature drop, sometimes up to 20 or 30 degrees, a bright bluebird sky, like the atmosphere is extremely clear. There's no like particulate or haze. It's just really, really bright, and a strong north wind. This is the worst case scenario for a bass fisherman. So when you're confronted with something like that, this post-frontal situation on these Arctic fronts, there's a couple of different things that you can do. And again, a lot of it is dependent upon the intensity of the wind. But there's two schools of thought. Immediately after the front, let's say, for example, the front comes through at 9 o'clock Friday night, and you're out there at 7 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning. The front has just come through. The first day after a front comes through, you can catch them on reaction baits, and sometimes reaction baits are a key. So one of the baits that I really like to use after an immediate frontal passage, if I have wind, is like a lipless crankbait. A lipless crankbait or some type of a crankbait that I can fish with some type of a fast retrieve to generate a reaction strike. After that front comes through, your baits that come high up in the water column, like a spinnerbait or a chatterbait or a topwater or a fluke or something like that, you might as well put those in your tackle box. The fish do not want to come up on a bait after a front, but they will stay down in the water column, and you can trigger them with that fast reaction strike. But after that time has passed, and after say 12, 18 hours, maybe a day after that front rolls through, those fish are going to get off those reaction lures for several days before the wind switches back to the south, which usually takes 2 or 3 days. And that is when you got to get to the bottom. So what my favorite way to fish after a front comes through, it's been within a day or so, is I go to bottom bouncing lures. I'll fish jigs and heavy cover on the bottom. I'll throw a Texas rig worm. I'll throw a shaky head, a Ned rig. I'll drag a football head jig, a drop shot, something like that, because bass do not want to chase after that scenario. That's just the mood and the personality that they get into. That's why you very seldom see anybody do well after a front on a reaction lure, unless maybe you're fishing like over aquatic vegetation. Aquatic vegetation sort of numbs the effect of a cold front, but if you're fishing traditional rock and wood structures like most people do, it's going to have a really big impact. So here's my advice on it. There is that little window, that reaction bait window, but I wouldn't spend much time on it. The thing that I like to do is I either like to go and fish heavy cover after a front comes through, like flipping lay down trees, bushes, boat docks, whatever, grass beds, thicker grass beds, something like that, or I go a little bit deeper. So I'm either going to be fishing whatever targets are available shallow that are thick, like hydrilla, milfoil, matted vegetation, boat dock pilings, brush piles, lay down trees, flooded bushes in the springtime if the water's up. But if I don't have that cover, I'm going to move out deeper, and I'm going to be fishing that 10 to 20 foot zone, like dragging football head jigs and shaky heads. You're going to have a lot better success doing that than if you try to, just fish normally. But that's just part of the cycle, guys. It's like bass fishing is a constant change. Every day is different. The conditions change every day, but there's not anything that changes how the bass react and what they bite more than an Arctic cold front that rolls through. So anyway, I hope it helps you guys catch a few, and we'll check in later. See it.